Welcome to 2021 New York City Council election, Meet the Candidates Night, hosted by Community Inclusion and Development Alliance, CIDA for short, and broadcasted by the Korean channel. My name is Kelly Her. I'm the Assistant Director of Communication at CIDA, and I will be the moderator for the session. In this session, we'll meet the candidates from New York City District 19 in Queens. District 19 includes Auburndale, Bayside, Bay Terrace, Beechhurst, College Point, Douglaston, Flushing, Whitestone, Little Neck, and Malba. This session is being live streamed via CIDA Facebook page and being broadcasted via the Korean channel. Our Executive Director, Dr. Young Bae, will kick off the session.
안녕하십니까. 시다의 뉴욕시 시의원 후보님들과의 만남의 밤에 오신 것을 환영합니다. 저는 시다 한인장애가족연대 대표 배영서입니다. 오늘 한인과 아시안 커뮤니티에 대한 각자의 관심사, 계획 및 비전을 공유하기 위해 참석해 주신 모든 후보자들께 감사 말씀 먼저 드립니다. 시다는 뉴욕의 유일한 아시안계 가족들을 위한 장애교육 및 정보지원센터이며 한인 가족들을 위해서는 특수교육 정보와 학부모 지원을 위해 연방교육부와 협력하고 있는 유일한 가족지원센터입니다. 그동안 모든 후보자들께서는 여러 지역기관들이 진행하고 있는 포럼에서 팬데믹과 관련된 문제와 다양한 지역 관련 사안들에 대해 많은 발표를 해오신 것으로 알고 있습니다. 오늘 저희 시다 포럼은 우리 이웃의 장애 문제와 취약계층에 대한 논의에 집중하고자 합니다. 장애가 있는 자녀나 가족이 있다는 것은 한인들뿐만 아니라 어느 가족들에게나 평생에 걸쳐 아픔이고 넘어가야 할 산이기도 합니다. 그러나 뉴욕의 아시안계 장애 가족들은 학교 가족 파트너십, 취업기회, 주거, 언어 접근성 및 정보를 접하는 기회에서 종종 소외되어 있기 때문에 더 많은 어려움에 직면하고 있습니다. 올해 선출되는 시의회의 역할은 뉴욕시의 많은 한인 및 기타 아시안계 장애가족들에게 그 어느 때보다 중요합니다. 우리 유권자들께서는 여러분들이 어떤 계획과 비전으로 지속적으로 한인들뿐만 아닌 많은 소외된 이웃들을 위해 소통하고 이들의 역량을 강화시킬지, 그리고 우리 지역사회가 다양한 사람들을 포용하는 지역사회의 최고의 모델로 거듭나기 위해 어떤 아이디어를 가지고 있는지 알고 싶어 하십니다. 다시 한번 시간을 내어 한인 주민들께 지역사회에 대한 비전과 계획을 공유해 주시는 후보자 모든 분들께 다시 한번 감사 말씀드립니다.
First thing first, we're gonna go around the table and meet the candidates. Richard, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're going to start with you. Tell us about yourself and your values, your connection to the community, and why you're running for the council member in your district. You have 2 minutes.
Sure. Thank you so much. 안녕하세요. 제 이름은 Richard Lee, 뉴욕시의원 후보입니다. 여기 19구역의 후보입니다. My name is Richard Lee, and I'm running for City Council for our 19th district. This district includes all the neighborhoods in between College Point and Little Neck, so it is a very large district, and it's a district that many of our community members live in. And I actually got started in community service when I joined as a tenant organizer for a nonprofit organization called Asian Americans for Equality. There, I was able to help individuals and fight for issues such as immigration reform, better access to small business services, planning, and city budget, and fighting for resources into our community. And that's when I was able to join the city council afterwards as legislative director. And most recently, I was able to serve as the budget director for Queens Borough President Melinda Katz, where I was for the last 7 years. And my approach to public service and for the community has always been shaped by my time serving as an organizer, in that we want to have a government that responds to the community. And instead of having a top-down approach to addressing issues in our community, but much so a bottom-up approach, where we are talking to communities first in order to identify how we can solve some of these issues, what the issues are, and come up with solutions that are going to better impact our neighborhoods. Because when you think about it, New York City is, is a conglomerate of different organizations, different neighborhoods, and each neighborhood is different. Out here in our district in Northeast Queens, we are also very different from the rest of New York City, in that we have a very suburban sort of district, and we have a very diverse district in which we have different needs across the board. And so my approach has always been, in order to improve our community, we have to really talk to the people first and then come up with solutions that are going to impact our community the best, in the best ways possible.
I was born and raised in this district. Obviously, I am not a member of the Asian community, but I grew up adjacent to the Asian community because I grew up in Flushing. So that's where my family has our small business. It's where part of the district that I'm running in is. Like Richard said, we extend all the way from College Point into Little Neck. And it is an honor to run for the candidacy. I advocate for refunding the NYPD so that our streets are maintained at a safe level. Right now, unfortunately, we've seen a rise in not only anti-Asian hate, but attacks citywide. And that is directly resulted in because of our NYPD budget being cut. So we need to refund them the $1 billion they've been cut, and then add an additional $1 billion so they become a reactionary police force, not a, so they become a preventative police force and not a reactionary police force. We're honored to be endorsed by the PBA. Myself being a former teacher, we're very much advocating for transparency in the New York City Department of Education and accountability, because we spend quite a lot of money educating our young people. And unfortunately, the quality of their education doesn't reflect how much we pay for it. So that's something else that we're advocating for. And, our district and our city at large is made up of immigrants from all over the world. Queens, per square foot, more languages are spoken in Queens than anywhere else in the world. And we don't need to aid in the diversification of Queens because it is already diverse. There's nothing a city councilman can do to make a population more diverse. What a city councilman can do is make it easier for that population to live and achieve their own versions of the American dream. And that's what I'm looking to do. So thank you guys very much for the forum. I'm excited to start answering the questions, and let's get it on.
Everyone counts the same, or no one counts at all. We have an incredibly diverse community, a very diverse district here, and advancing racial, social justice, equity, access, and equitability really is arguably one of, if not the most important things that we can do, because a recovery that doesn't cover everybody really covers nobody. And in this moment where we've seen a rise in hate crimes, where we've seen small business owners and families, particularly in the Asian American community, shut out of the recovery process, it's incredibly important that we improve access to government programs, services, grants, security and safety measures to make sure that everyone is counted equally and everyone has equal access. I think back to a quote from World War II with a philosopher that said, first they came for the trade unionists and I wasn't one, so they didn't speak up. And then they came for the socialists and I wasn't one, so I didn't speak up. And then they came for the Jews and I wasn't one, so I didn't speak up. And then they came for me and there was no one left to speak up. We have to have that same mentality today. We're all united with common purpose and with purposeful togetherness. A racial injustice, a bias, a hate crime, or even just a lack of access to a basic service or program that is a mark against one community is something that is a crime against all communities. And we need to come together in a united way to make sure that we're all served equally, thoughtfully, and fairly.
I used to be the former city council member for 8 years for the 19th Council District. And I was also the state senator for this area for 8 years. So I'm very familiar with the community, the issues, and how to address the issues. People have asked me to come back. I've been out of office for a couple of years. And quite frankly, I'm frustrated by what I see going on in the city and in the community. And I think, if anything, especially after the pandemic, we need real leadership. People who know what has gone before, what we need to do differently, and to be a hands-on person representing the community, which I've always been.
District 19 has the most Korean American population in the city, and many other Asian families are moving into the district. So we're curious, what are your visions and priorities in advancing racial, social, and economic justice in your district? How does the diverse Asian community sort of take part in your vision? And on this question, we're going to hear from you, John Alexander, first.
The arc of human history, I like to think, bends itself towards being good, right? I think humans by their own nature are good. We have some really bad humans out there, but for the most part, we all have some sort of divine spark within us that shows us a moral compass, right? Unfortunately, we need police officers to make sure that those of us who don't have that moral compass are kept in check. So in the instance where you talked about the subway, the New York City Metropolitan Transit Association, the MTA, they requested from the mayor, I think something like 2,000 more subway patrolmen. And I think the mayor gave them 500, right? So this is an example of we're going back to being a reactionary police force in a reactionary city. We're not taking proactive steps to protect our citizens. So in regards to the Asian community in District 19, like I said before, a city councilman is not in charge of who moves in and out of a district. So I would have no control over how diverse one particular district is over another. What I would have control over is how the laws passed by the city council affect those peoples. And I think Korean Americans, much like Greek Americans, much like Italian Americans, much like all Americans, their number one focus is on education. That is the number one American ideal. And I can say that coming from my own immigrant background, the number one thing in our lives that was expressed to us by our parents was getting a good education and doing well. And I see a lot of that also in the Korean American community. We need to make sure that our schools are temples of academia, that we are temples of knowledge. We need to invest the right appropriate amount of money in them and make sure that their academic integrity is in check. Meaning, you know, there's a big movement to cut the specialized high school test. I very much oppose it because I feel it disenfranchises a large swath of our Asian American neighbors whose primary cultural perspective is makes students study harder for the test. If a student studies harder, they do well. I was a teacher for not decades, but a couple of years, and I can tell you that the students who study tend to do better than the students that don't. That's a system that we need to keep, right? I don't believe that the city can legislate equity.
As you can tell, I've been Asian American my whole life. And I think the conversation that's been going on right now with the rise in anti-Asian hate crime is more so we're seeing a lot of these incidences happening, but none of the charges are being made with a hate crime on it. And so these individuals are getting charged for their felony or attack, but not as a hate crime. And so I think that's frustrating a lot of individuals. And I think what we have to do is come up with parameters to finally define when an individual is going to be charged with a hate crime. The second I want to mention is that I think in general in media, there's a lot of microaggressions that are placed upon Asian Americans that consistently places them in a role of being a perpetual foreigner. And because of these microaggressions that compound over and over again, many individuals who are attacking our community have the sense that we don't belong, the Asian Americans don't belong. And we have to do better in stemming that sentiment all across the board in all forms of media. If you think about it, about a week ago, the New York Post stated that, it's because of Asian Americans that we have to now take the specialized high school exam out, right? Those are like microaggressions, putting us at blame for an instance where we have no control over. We're just simply taking a test, right? But those kinds of microaggressions are happening over and over and over again. And we have to curb that and advocate against that. I think the Asian American community has been vocal advocates in ensuring that our viewpoints are always heard and our organizations are properly funded. And I think we can do a little bit better. And I hope to do that as a council member, to give a platform to voice concerns in our community so that when there are instances like this or other instances where there are inequitable access to information or resources, that we're going to be able to fight for this. And finally, I think one thing that the city can do immediately is integrate better on American history, specifically history of immigrants and Asian American history, specifically indicating, you know what, our community, we've actually been here for a very long time. Growing up, I went to public school my whole life, and I didn't learn anything about Asian American history until I got to college. I didn't learn about the railroads. I didn't learn about the Chinese Exclusion Act. I didn't even learn about Japanese internment until I got to college. But we start teaching this as part of curriculum, and I think it's going to better integrate individuals to understanding the shared experiences that the Asian American community has with other immigrant groups who've also come to our country and also face similar circumstances.
So I have a very basic, simple philosophy, a guiding principle, what is really the true north on a moral compass, and that's everybody counts the same or nobody counts at all. The Asian American community is part of the fabric, part of the backbone of this district of Northeast Queens, and we have to do much more to have a more racially diverse, sensitive, inclusive, and accessible government and the community around it. And whether we're talking about opening up housing opportunities, loans and assistance for small businesses, language access, educational opportunities, we need there to be not only more equity, but more equality in the process for all New Yorkers, for all folks that live in this district, and particularly for Asian Americans. I think back to decades ago, or almost a century ago now, where during World War II, as philosophers said, first they came for the socialists, and I wasn't one, so I didn't speak up. And then they came for the trade unionists, and I wasn't one, I didn't speak up. And then they came for the communists, and I wasn't one of them, so I didn't speak up. And then they came for me, and no one was left to speak up. I think that sentiment is what we need to get back to in this moment, where we're all united, we're all members of the same community, and any harm, any degradation, any hate or bias against one member of our community is a crime against all members of our community. And we need to stand together in unity and say, we are together and we stand as one.
First of all, it's an absolute disgrace what's been happening to the Korean and Chinese community. These hate crimes are just abhorrent. I think we need to address it on a number of levels. One, we need to double the hate crime penalties. The penalties for hate crimes are not sufficient to deter this type of crime. Second, I think we need to support the police. Unfortunately, the police have been defunded over the past couple of years. I would never vote to defund the police if I'm reelected to the city council. In fact, I'm proud to be supported by a number of law enforcement agencies, including the Police Benevolent Association. We have to give the police the power to address these type of crimes. That's the first thing. Restoring funding that's been lost to them is the second thing. If the police don't have the resources and the manpower, how can they possibly address these type of crimes? So that's the first thing, and the second and the third. In addition, I'd like to set up an Asian task force in my council district, in my office, to have regular meetings on these issues and other issues that are important to the Korean and Chinese community. And we could do that quarterly with representatives of all the organizations. This way we get to address issues as they come up and try and be proactive rather than reactive.